scene in the movie Glory. I hope you've seen it. It's an excellent movie that I always find to be very powerful when I watch it. Glory is the true story of the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry Regiment during the Civil War. The 54th was commanded by white officers, but all of its soldiers were black. After facing prejudice from his commanding general, who didn't intend to let the 54th actually fight because he considered them to be inferior and incapable of fighting, their captain, Captain Robert Shaw, played by Matthew Broderick, finally secures permission to take the regiment into battle. The regiment fights well in a few skirmishes, but then confronts a major challenge, an all-out assault on Fort Wagner, which protected Charleston Harbor. Now, the Union Army had tried and failed to take Fort Wagner on a few attempts before this, and now the 54th is going to be one of the lead regiments in a renewed attempt to take it. Casualties are expected to be high, perhaps devastatingly high. Even if the battle is won, it will be a very difficult day for the 54th. So on the night before the battle, the men of the 54th gather around a campfire to hold a church service, during which the men sing spirituals very powerfully, and several of them give impassioned speeches about the need to rely on God and face death in order to inspire the nation with their value as men. That scene is powerful because it shows the bravery and dedication of men that were willing to die for the future of a country where most people thought they were inferior. It is clear that they're not fighting for the present, but for a future that they hope will one day come, and of course fighting for each other. The concluding scene of the movie is the climactic battle where Captain Shaw and many of his men are killed, and the fort yet stands defiantly at the end. But the movie's postscript reveals that the bravery of the 54th inspired the Union to accept more African American soldiers into the Army, hundreds of thousands of whom responded to that call. A virtual tidal wave of new men that Abraham Lincoln credited with helping to win the war. So consider how they spent their last night before going into battle as we look at just one verse tonight. Luke chapter 22, verse 15. And there's the whole text right there. It says, "And he said to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." And I just want to think about that one verse for a few minutes. You see, Jesus knew what was going to happen on Friday. This took place on Thursday night. He knew that it would be his last day, and that it would be horrific beyond words. What did he do with his last night to prepare himself for the upcoming ordeal? He celebrated the Passover with his friends. The Passover meal had been celebrated by the descendants of Abraham, the covenant people, since it was instituted by God through Moses in commemoration of the meal that was eaten by their ancestors on the night before the last plague befell Egypt, the death of the firstborn. At that meal, a lamb was sacrificed and its blood applied to the doorposts of the home to signify to the angel to literally pass over this house. The imagery of that lamb's blood shed to save the people, who then ate its flesh, would be utilized by Jesus when he told his followers something they had very much difficulty in understanding. He told them, "You need to eat my flesh and drink my blood if you will follow me." A lot of people thought he was crazy after that. It was an idea that he later formalized at the Last Supper. So the Passover meal, with its symbolism of God's providence and his rescue of his people, was the proper time for Jesus to introduce the new covenant and the celebration to come of communion. But the meal itself meant more to Jesus than just being the right time to teach his disciples how to commemorate his impending death. The Passover meal was important to Jesus this time more than ever before because it was a meal in remembrance of how God's mighty hand had delivered his people from a foe that was beyond their power to resist. Passover highlighted God's faithfulness to his people, something Jesus himself would soon need as he was about to go out to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray to his Father, because he was about to be entirely, totally dependent upon the promise of the resurrection. For Jesus' role in God's plan required him to willingly die. So the Passover was important for Jesus in that respect. You see, even though Jesus was the Son of God, he was also a mortal man that had to live moment by moment. He needed to trust his Father to the very end, to be able to recall that God had been trustworthy in the past, so that he would know that God would be trustworthy now. And that would help Jesus until this ordeal came to its conclusion. The Passover meal then was very significant for Jesus, both for its symbolism and for its ability to bolster his faith and the ultimate victory of life over death. But Jesus' words here in verse 15 also reveal that the people he shared that last Passover with were an important part of why it meant so much to him. The 11 men reclined around the table with him were Jesus' disciples. They had chosen to follow him and learn from his teachings. They had ministered alongside him to help those in need. They had spent years at his side, through thick and through thin, through victory and through difficulties. But they were not Jesus' employees. They were not his subordinates. They were his friends. And I don't want to discount the value of his mother Mary or his half-brother James. We know they were both very important to him. But these 11 men were also his family in a very real way. On the night that would begin his ordeal, a few short hours before his arrest in the garden, Jesus wanted to spend time with his friends, celebrating God's goodness. He knew that they would scatter like sheep when their shepherd was arrested. He knew that Peter would disown him, but he also knew that John would be there at the foot of the cross to comfort his mother Mary. And he knew that each one of these men would eventually die a martyr's death, attempting to share the good news of the gospel with a world in need. There is tremendous value for us to spend time with the people of God, celebrating and remembering what God has done for us. Those who think they don't need to come to church to spend time with God are missing out on exactly what Jesus craved so much for himself. Friendship that is built upon a mutual dedication to serving God. Very powerful thing. The people that come to this particular place each week are the most natural grouping of people in your life. You did not choose your family. Whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, you didn't choose them. Your friends growing up largely reflect the people that you went to school with or the people that lived in your neighborhood. And you certainly never know what you're going to get when it comes to coworkers. But the people who make up a local church are different. Yes, geography has something to do with it. We all need to live close enough to get here. But we all don't live on this neighborhood or block, just us really, but the rest of you live a little bit further away. And yes, family is a factor in deciding to come here. Many people here are related to someone else who also comes here. But the overriding common factor is that we all chose to join this particular body of believers. The reasons no doubt vary as to why that choice was made. And some people will eventually choose to go somewhere else, while others will at some point choose to come here. But the bond that is created among us, because you and I chose to be here, can be as profoundly powerful and helpful to us as it was for Jesus to be with his friends. If you let it be, this church and its people will be part of the best things that happen in your life to come. And it will be here for you during the worst things to come too. They will be a network of support, encouragement, and comfort for you. They will celebrate with you when you have happy news, and they will cry with you when you are full of sorrow. They will pray for you. They will help you in real, concrete ways, and they will show brotherly love all because we chose to share our common bond of faith in Jesus Christ. You see, before his passion, Jesus eagerly desired to celebrate the Passover and remember God's goodness with his friends. It is right and fitting that we take communion together. For our mutual faith in Jesus Christ is what transforms the people that just happen to come to the same church as you and I into a church family.